Welcome to the Unknown Webcast, and as always, in case you haven't figured it out, I am so conservative, I have trouble turning left even when I'm driving. This is broadcast 22, and our guest tonight is Paul Carden and Pasha, I'll let him say his whole last name, from the Centers for Apologetics Research. We are talking about the international apologetics on this edition of the Unknown Webcast. My name is Don Vino, and I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. Our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of tonight's webcast.
Well, greetings from hot and humid Florida. We're taking a break from lightning right now to share with you our sponsors tonight. This broadcast is brought to you by World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop destination for dubious doctrines, half-baked heresies, and other notions whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet, and also by the Bible Buffet. It's not your usual Sunday morning worship experience, the Bible Buffet. Back to you, Don.
All right, and Paul, I know I had Pasha's name earlier. Stolyarov? Stolyarov?
That's right.
Okay.
Stolyarov.
Pasha? Okay, good. And Pasha is from Russia, correct?
Right. From St. Petersburg.
Okay. Up in the north, kind of. Northeast or northwest of Moscow, right?
Right. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Approximately 400 miles.
400 miles, all right.
Formerly known as Leningrad. And then formerly known as St. Petersburg before that.
No,
Yeah.
see, I didn't know that.
Well, there's your geography lesson. Some of the most beautiful architecture in the world, as I've seen in pictures. I believe my parents visited and took many beautiful pictures.
In pictures and in films also.
Yes.
Paul, I want to come to you first before we get too involved with ministry to Russia. As you know, and we've talked about this, and we're both members of Evangelical Ministries to New Religions, and we've talked about this at our conferences. And Ron and I whine about it from time to time. Apologetics and missions, particularly missions to cults and new religious movements, tends to be kind of the ugly, red-headed stepchild of the church. Not too many people really want to know that we're even doing what we're doing unless they lose a family member to a religious group. At least that's how it is in the United States. And yet you have taken what we're doing on an international circuit, in a sense. What prompted you to do that, and where do you have centers at currently?
This is based in some personal history. On July 1st, 1980, I was a newly minted researcher, editor at the Christian Research Institute led by Walter Martin in Anaheim, California. A year later, he sent me to East and Southern Africa, for 3 months. And the experience changed my life. I saw that pastors, for example, had nowhere to turn with their questions about the Jehovah's Witnesses, about the Mormons, who were still beginning to gather some of their initial strength on the continent, a number of other groups. And having come from an organization that had started more than 20 years before, was sort of a full spectrum apologetics agency, right? Walter Martin's Christian Research Institute would answer your letter or your phone call, do original research, broadcast, publish. And I thought, surely there's a way for such an organization to be started here. Well, 2 years after that, I was sent to Brazil for 9 months, which turned into 6 years, and I started the first South American branch of the Christian Research Institute. And from there, we've gone on. We started the work in Russia in 1993, have either started or picked up as affiliates ministries in Ukraine and Hungary, Ethiopia, Uganda. And so the idea is to have these full spectrum apologetics agencies helping Christians to identify, understand, answer, and evangelize the followers of cults, new and controversial religious movements, non-Christian worldviews, and that the staffers be nationals who know the language, who are in the culture, who are fully networked, who are able to respond to the situation in context all the time. By God's grace, this is what we have in a number of locations, and Pasha has been the director of the center in St. Petersburg since 2001, though he joined us in 1994.
Okay. How much actual training do you have to do with those who are your directors, like Pasha, or do they come to you sort of already with a passion and some training in this field already?
It varies widely by situation. Our Ethiopian team was very, very sophisticated, some of them self-taught, deeply read in the works of not only Western apologists but philosophers before we first made their acquaintance. Our Uganda director graduated from the top four-year Christian college in his country and had never once heard the word apologetics spoken. And yet, in the period of 5-6 years, has become a terrific spokesman for the defense of the faith and a great teacher in this area. Our Hungarian director was working in apologetics with InterVarsity for a number of years before we first made his acquaintance. And so there's really quite a variety among the people leading the various affiliate agencies.
Okay. You know, my kind of first experience with overseas questions, and you and I, we shared this a little bit yesterday. I have two that really come to mind right away. One is a large mission organization, which for now will remain nameless. I had a friend who was pretty high up in the leadership, and I had been talking to him about the growth of cults and false religious movements, not only here, but overseas, because of certain things that were going on at the time. I spoke with him, and he said they really needed to have us on staff, which I thought that was true. And as he talked more with other leadership, he came back and said, you know, our people probably need this more than they realize, but the leadership doesn't think cults are that important. So what we'd like you to do is to think about coming on staff as a construction manager, move to Brussels, and from time to time you may have an opportunity in between construction projects to invest an hour a week here and there teaching a little bit on cults and false religious views. I didn't really believe that was what I was called to do, and they didn't seem to take it seriously. Shortly after that, a pastor friend of mine called. He was an EV Free Church and had some missionaries they were supporting who had been in Russia going around showing the Jesus film. You might remember that period of time. They had a translator with them when they were doing that, and then they came back for a year to complete their support raising. Part of that was supposed to be preparation, further preparation for the mission field they were going to. It might have been I'm pretty sure it was Russia. It might have been in Ukraine, but I'm pretty sure it was Russia. Anyway, I met with them for lunch one day because we had been talking about getting them a little better equipped to deal with cults and false religions, and we had lunch. It was a delightful lunch. We gave them some materials, some books, and they said, you know, we don't really think we need this because we just need to present the gospel. People are so spiritually hungry, and I remember I had friends who were going over there as evangelists, and they would call me and they'd say, if you haven't led 100 people to Christ by the time you set up your speakers, you're not called to be an evangelist here. That was right after the fall of the Iron Curtain.
Oh, hubris.
Yes, oh, hubris. And so off they went, and about 3 weeks after they went, they emailed me just white-knuckle panicked because the translator that had been going with them around a year earlier was now a Mormon. They had 3 Mormon churches in the area where they were living, and they had no idea even where to begin a conversation and could we help them. So it's a little difficult to do that long distance.
Indeed.
So since then, obviously, you all have started your branch in Russia. We have, obviously, American-born and exported cults like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Are there groups that have started in Russia competing for the Christian worldview, and what kind of groups are they?
Russia.
Later I may show these pictures, but in Russia we do have our own indigenous groups. Most of them are kind of New Age groups, esoteric groups. For example, we do have very famous groups named Anastasia. So they believing that the goddess woman Anastasia, who nobody saw anytime, only the founder of the cult, Vladimir Migre, he saw her somewhere in the middle of Siberia. So this woman living there, she is giving to this Vladimir Migre different ideas, messages. Yes, that's right. And he is transferring these messages into his books for Russians. So one of the main idea is that to be kind of with God, to be to harmonize the place, the space around yourself, you need to plant so-called Siberian cedar tree, so that tree would harmonize the space around you. You should follow rules from Goddess Anastasia, and everything would be okay. So your salvation, your kind of spiritual life would be protected by herself. Another cult, kind of also New Age, but with strong communication with Christianity. We also do have our own Jesus Christ, who is living in Siberia also, in villages, village closer to Minusinsk, such a quite a big town in Siberia, Minusinsk. So, and there are people around him who believe that he is the second incarnation of Jesus Christ, and he himself, Vissarion, he wants to be like Jesus Christ, but from the popular movies that we saw about Jesus Christ, like from Jesus film and things like this. So, and people really believe that he is a living Word of God who came to us to say the truth. So every word that he is literally pronunciation, saying to people, there are people who are recording for him and putting in so-called Last Testament. So right now there are more than 10 volumes of Last Testament kind of words that this Vissarion told to people. So we do have a big variety of different groups, and plus we do have so-called audience cults that are gathering together about ideas. We do have many so-called prophets who are speaking through their books, through their publications, so that thousands and thousands of people reading these books, involving in this books distribution, like they're following their ideas and so on. And that's a great challenge for the church also, because in compare with Christian publications, for one Christian book we have thousands and thousands such kind of New Age, esoteric, Eastern mysticism books. So that's a huge problem and big difference.
All right, now you said audience cults.
Yeah, what's that?
Describe what that is.
Such a group without actual members.
So, for example, Rodney Stark and Lawrence Iannacone write about this in one of their books. They're sociologists of religion, and I'm forgetting the title of the work. I think it came out in the 80s. Mm-hmm. But this is a term that they've used to describe groups that don't have formal meeting places, that don't have membership, but are basically, for example, somebody like Tony Robbins or Rhonda Byrne have what are in effect audience cults. People who go to seminars, people who buy books or other products, tapes. If you understand the distinction.
YouTube, right? Okay. All right. So they are followers, but they don't have a meeting place or regular meetings or anything like that.
Membership standards per se, but but they're united by the ideology and the charisma of the leaders.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
Is anyone claiming to be a reincarnation of Rasputin in Russia?
I didn't heard about such a group, but
Anything is possible.
yeah, actually,
When I think of Russia, the brand of religion or Christianity that it's attracted to, it does seem to me to be very heavy on the mystical emphasis, going back, of course, past Rasputin into the 19th century. And when you talk about New Age, I guess it shouldn't be any surprise that that's one of the major thrusts in cults in that part of the world. Are there any that don't fit that mold, that are more rationalistic or, rejecting the mystical angle?
Like Scientologists.
Okay, well, they're kind of weird. Jehovah's Witnesses I would consider to be a very rationalistic cult.
Excessively so.
Mm-hmm.
And are they big in the Soviet or in Russia?
Jehovah's Witnesses, yes, they are. They are very big, and for example, in compare with one of the main union, the Baptist Union.
The largest denomination.
Yeah, one of the largest denomination in Russia, Protestant denomination in Russia. Jehovah's Witnesses about 3 times more than Baptists.
Oh,
Really?
Really?
Yeah, triple the largest Protestant denomination.
Yeah, according to the numbers that both unions published, Jehovah's Witnesses approximately 3 times more. So it's a big challenge, and of course for those who are in a mission field, every time they're facing such questions from unbelievers, like, who are you? If you're not Orthodox, so who are you? Maybe you're a cultist.
Mm-hmm.
First, we need to explain that we are not Jehovah's Witnesses, we are not Mormons, we are from Protestant denomination, and only after that it was possible to speak about Christ. People
Well,
really,
Jehovah's Witness almost makes sense to me as you bring it up, because it was sort of like remaining. How do I think about this? Remaining a communist that believes in God. I mean, it's the same kind of legalistic, top-down authoritarian rule, unquestioning obedience. So that would seem to fit from a culture that had lived under that sort of ethos for a long time.
Hmm.
you know, approximately 80%, maybe less, maybe a little more, approximately 80% of our population calling themselves Orthodox, Russian Orthodox Church.
But how many people is that?
110 million, approximately.
Okay.
Approximately this amount of people are calling themselves Russian Orthodox, but only approximately 10% from them, or 10 or 15, at least 4 times a year receiving the communion. And more than 60% did not ever read the Bible in their entire life.
I noticed that you called yourself, when you talk to other Russians, you use the word Protestant. Do you ever use the word evangelical? What kind of connotations does that, or is it even used in your work?
It's very difficult in Russia, because in Russia, and we do have such investigations already made, and researchers that are showing that, for example, a positive attitude to the name Orthodox Church, approximately 95% people do have. But to the word Christianity, and of course evangelical or Protestant, only from 25 to 30% do have more or less, I would say, not negative attitude, but negative. How much negative attitude people do have? From 50 to 75% negative attitude toward the word Christian.
Really?
Right. Because in the
Orthodox
mind,
is okay, but Christian.
Christian mean Western or Catholic.
Really?
And especially Protestant or evangelical. So it's kind of a such a broad understanding of differences. So we are Russian Orthodox, and all others, Protestant, evangelical, Christians, they are different. They are from another world.
That's the attitude.
That's just general attitude. It's not a point of beliefs, but attitude in the society.
How about, well, I imagine that the attitude toward Greek Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, and so on would be better than it is toward Catholic, wouldn't it?
Not everywhere, because especially Ukrainian Orthodox also negative because they were splitted from Russian Church.
Because they're Ukrainians.
So that is why all who were splitted from so-called Holy Russian Church, they are kind of under negative connotation.
Okay.
But again, it is not a point of religion. It's point of social attitude in a society, because among those Orthodox who really understand the differences, of course, they themselves describing this as a problem. For them, it is not right to distinguish between Christianity and Orthodoxy. And actually, I'm giving you the results of survey from Orthodox research. So they themselves understand that this is problematic. This is a problem in a society among average people. That's an attitude.
In our country, the word cult, of course, that you're probably, of all the words, people don't want to be called a cult. Nobody wants to be called that. Is there a Russian equivalent to that word, and does it also have the same kind of reaction?
We usually using in Russia in the public sphere, people usually using name sect, sekta.
Sect.
Да, секта, that's right. And not oftenly people using word cult. Mostly they are using such terms like destructive sect or totalitarian sect, which is even more difficult, more negative. That's right.
So
it is a very emotional topic, and people using these emotional terms just to make additional proofs.
Okay. So that's interesting. I'm told that in France, the word evangelical, in many areas, especially in the media, has taken on the connotation of the word cult. In fact, they almost use them interchangeably in France.
Right.
We have missionary friends there who they have to deal with this a lot. Their congregation people come to them and say, "Are we in a cult? Did we join a cult? Because I just saw something on television that makes me think that," and they are constantly dealing with that. But that's not a problem for you, is it?
Actually, in the media, we do not use word evangelical at all.
Use Protestant.
We Christians, we Protestants.
Protestants. Actually, I do not see such a word in the social media.
However, Baptists and other groups are stigmatized as cultic in mainstream sensationalized media.
And especially Pentecostals.
All the time. Oh my goodness. Well, the Pentecostals are the ones that provide the greatest pretext for blackening Protestants with the label cult.
That's right.
Now, Pentecostals as a group, or word faithers in particular?
Neo-Pentecostals. Word
Neo-Pentecostals. Word faithers. Okay.
Yeah, prosperity gospel people. Benny Hinn, Mike Murdoch, Joyce Meyer, Andrew Womack. I mean, all these people are very popular in Russia.
Really?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Sadly.
So they get translated into Russian. Do they dub them or something like that?
TV, YouTube,
books.
Yeah.
It's a continuous avalanche.
Okay.
Wow.
And too many people after their preachings really think that God should give them some prosperity or wealth or health, and not receiving this, they're just going away too far from from not just church, but from faith in God. That's a problem. And they're blaming Christians because God did not give them these things.
Okay. So go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I was just thinking. We had earlier this week we had gotten news that Russia had just passed a law, or at least I just heard about it this week, that you really can't talk about religion outside of church. You can't do any street evangelism. I don't know if you can't talk about it in your home or not. You guys can speak to that. And at first I was wondering if it's similar to Singapore. When I was in Singapore 2 years ago, you can't do any on-street evangelism. It's illegal to do that. But in their case, they had quite a few very bloody religious wars pretty early on. Singapore has only been a country since 1964. And so they really passed that law to try to stem the tide of conversion by the sword, if you will.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you can't talk about religion, but there has to be sort of an agreement. You can't do on-street evangelism. You got to be very careful. And I'm not sure how that's going to play out in Russia. Pasha, what do you think? How will that impact the work that you all are doing there?
Maybe you should just explain a little more about what the Yarovaya laws actually do restrict and do not restrict, as we understand them today.
Yes, the problem is that the law is very broad. It restricts actually any kind of mission, any kind of proselytism on a territory outside of the church, literally. Only on a territory, on a church territory, property, you may do any kind of proselytizing mission work.
Conversion.
And even at homes, it is prohibited to convert people to your faith.
What if a child sees a parent trying to convert someone to another faith in that family's home?
Very good question, because according to the law, if the child would not report about the possible, I mean
age 14 and over.
Since age 14 and over. If he would not report about possible crime in this sense.
Missionary activity.
It is saying crime.
Sure, but it's a missionary activity that becomes a crime when you do it even in your home.
Yes. If he would not report, about it, he also
he would face penalties.
Yes, face penalties, and he also
go to jail.
Yeah. No. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
Well, if there are...
It's a really difficult law, and we do not know how to react to this until we would see how the government would apply these positions, and it would start to work at 20th of July. So, and until we would see real
enforcement,
real court decisions, we wouldn't say how it would apply.
Pasha, do you remember the or do you remember the Soviet days? Are you? I'm trying to figure out how old you are.
I was born during Soviet times, yeah.
During the what?
During the Soviet times.
And you remember them? I mean, you look very young to me. I'm thinking you might. I don't know how long your memory is.
How old were you when the Soviet Union dissolved?
18.
Okay, so you have a pretty good memory. Right. In terms of the, I think of several things. First of all, the difference in religious freedom between then and now, and then I think of also just the amount of information about the scriptures, teaching, what was available to people. How much change has there been since 1989, 1990? How much in your experience and in your view, how much has changed?
I would say that almost everything was changed, because during the communist times we were not allowed Actually, officially, it was allowed to go to a church, but if you are a believer, you would face different restrictions, you would face different problems with it, and it was quite difficult to find a Bible and almost impossible for foreigners to bring Bible to Russia and so on.
Okay. I guess Don wants me to go to a commercial really soon, but I want to, when I come back, I'd like to talk about a friend of mine, Gennady Sergenko. If he's out there, hi Gennady. I met him right after the fall of the Iron Curtain. He came over to a seminary where I was working to study, and it was a very, very interesting experience getting to know him. But do you want me to do that now, Don?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, so we're going to take a little break here, and we're going to talk about some people that our friends at World's End Theology outlet want you to know about. Listen, are you troubled by the existence of countless Christian denominations? Do you tend to think that everyone's judgment is questionable except yours? Do you have a nose for excellent marketing opportunities? Well, the Heterodox Company wants you to know about their brand new product. It's called the Do-It-Yourself One True Church Kit. It has everything you need to shut out untold millions from God's kingdom. With the One True Church Kit, you get doctrinal options. Do you want to use the Bible, or do you want to use your own scriptures? Do you have practical options? Do you want to be pacifist, or do you want to stockpile AK-47s? You can have your own church history. Why should the facts of what happened determine your view of what's going on? You have proselytizing gimmicks. You have so much more. We even throw in a scores of church architectural plans and building rental options. The One True Church Kit has been endorsed by all kinds of people who have had success with it. A pastor in Indianapolis writes, "Thanks to the Do-It-Yourself One True Church Kit, my disciples are so narrow they can look through a keyhole with both eyes." We have a pope in Phoenix who says, "It's a great product. I've never had my ring kissed so many times." And a church in Philadelphia says, "Go away. Now that we're the One True Church, we don't waste our time with spiritual peasants like you." The Do-It-Yourself One True Church Kit, everything you need, only available through World's End Theology Outlet. All right, we're back, right?
Yes, we are back. Now just so Pasha understands, sometimes we have to just kind of make fun of some things because we'd lose our mind if we didn't.
Never
we like satire.
What's that?
An ever-present danger, to be sure.
Yes.
We're all apologists.
My friend Gennady, who I got to know in 1990-91, I remember I was driving him around. He didn't have a car, of course. I was driving him around the Chicago area, and there was this place near where I lived where when you drove over this hill, you had this very nice view of the Chicago skyline. And he was in the car with me one day, and we were driving over the hill, and I said, "You're about to see a really nice view of the skyline," because the skies were clear that day. And as we crested the hill, I said, "Gennady, I can't tell you how many times I've crested this hill and envisioned a nuclear bomb going off over the city that was sent to us by your country." And he looked at me like, "Really? You really? No, really?" It was like we were living. I became aware from talking to him that we were about the same age, and we had lived in two totally different worlds. And I have often wondered exactly how different are they? How much got through of especially who the Christian church in the West was. Not that we're terribly proud of what we are all the time. And now you're bringing me up to date to the year 2016, and you're telling me that a lot of the bad stuff from here is getting through over there and becoming very popular. It makes me wonder, is any of the good stuff getting through to the churches that are more concerned about the scriptures, are more faithful to Christ? Are any of the good teachers from the West being listened to over in Russia? Is that happening?
I would say, of course, and sure, we do have wonderful books, wonderful teachers, and a great help that was given to Russian churches, especially from the after the falling of Soviet Union. It's in the term of mission, in the term of supporting churches, supporting education, pastors, all kind of mission development on the field of Russia, on the land of Russia. So there are a lot of, I would say, good results and good teachers who were taught very conservative Bible teachings. So helps so much, and we do have very good publications of Christian books in Russian language, and some of them appear in Russia maybe after 2 or 3 years when they are publishing in the United States. So we are quite familiar with the good names here, which you know here. So we're also familiar with them. And in terms of apologetic, of course, we are very well known. Such names like Norman Geisler, William Lane Craig, Lee Strobel, McDowell, of course, very well known. So those names are very well known in Russia, and we do have wonderful results of their work and their help.
Are there any names we should know over here in the United States or in the West? Should we know? I mean, are there any really strong Russian teachers who are coming up in this generation who are making an impact? Because I mean, our goal, as we see it, should always be that you know, the indigenous peoples, wherever they are, you know, the people who are there, will take up the mantle and become, you know, they will become the evangelists, the apologists, the, you know, do you see any really encouraging signs right now? Will I be reading some books written by a fantastic Russian theologian maybe someday?
I think definitely we're growing up, and for Russia, I do see some people who are writing a good professional works, but I don't know how they would be, how soon they would be familiar on the West. But we do have people who already quite well known. In terms of apologetics, yes. I'm not very familiar in all names in theological field, but anyway, we do have our own results also.
Well, it sounds like we will hear. I mean, once they're translated into English, we should be hearing from them.
Maybe.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
So
now, for those who are viewing, a couple things. They can send in questions. There's a couple of ways they could do that. They could go through our Google page, Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc., or they could send them in. There's a question button on your screen. You can send them in. Also, Paul and Pasha had sent us links to a few things. I have 2 or 3 of them in our share section, the showcase, actually, the showcase section. We have their Russian website. Now, I'd like to read it to you, but I can't. I have trouble with English. I can't read Russian for sure.
It's the Cyrillic alphabet that gives you the trouble.
So we have 2 of their Russian links and 1 for the Centers for Apologetics Research. That link is there as well. So you have multiple ways to go and look at what they're doing in Russia for sure. And what other sorts of things do you have on your website, Paul?
On the Centers for Apologetics Research website, we have links to our affiliate ministries in Hungary and Uganda and so forth. We have some video resources, though really we're emphasizing our YouTube channel, which is CFAR Video, which has not only messages that I've given at various conferences, such as the former Adventist Fellowship Conference that's held annually, but also my colleague Tim Martin, formerly with Watchman Fellowship, has done a lot of great work with Jehovah's Witnesses, with Mormonism, even Seventh-day Adventism. He has an 11-part series on the Word Faith movement. So if people will go to YouTube on C-part video, they will get some especially good teaching resources.
You know, you guys are doing overseas stuff, and there's a group that I have been wanting to look into. I just haven't had the time to get invested into it, that has come out of Denmark, calling themselves the Last Reformation. It seems like they're sort of a maybe a B-string team of the New Apostolic Reformation movement. Do you know much about them?
Only what I've seen in email traffic with you.
Okay.
They have not gotten into former communist or third world countries yet to any perceptible extent. At least they haven't shown up on our radar. And so hopefully this will not be necessary. But if they do, we will give them all due attention.
You know, the Apostle Paul warned the Ephesian elders in Acts chapter 20 to beware of false teachers who will rise up in their own midst. And one of the things that we deal with at Midwest Christian Outreach is every once in a while somebody from within the church comes up and either becomes outright heretical or starts to start playing fast and loose with doctrines like the Trinity or the resurrection. We had what is it now, 15 years ago, we had a sensation going through the church called Way Down Workshop. Right. It was a weight loss program which was combined with spiritual teaching. And lo and behold, the leader of it denied the Trinity, and she was... Right.
Well, but she started out not orthodox, but no one investigated it because it was, quote, just a women's thing, and it was a diet program. No one viewed it as teaching theology. It wasn't until she clearly enunciated her view of the Trinity on her website that people started wondering, is there a problem? And that was in the year 2000. Yeah, so 16 years ago now.
Are you running into these kinds of problems with the Russian, evangelicals, Baptists, and so on? Are these kinds of things becoming a problem for you too?
Sure. We from a classical problems like people who deny Trinity inside of Christianity, like oneness Pentecostal, so they're saying that well-known things that there is no Trinity. To some specific new teachers who are appearing in different places, mostly based on Word Faith movement teachings. They are twisting the Bible, twisting different sides of the Scripture, so in terms to proclaim their own vision of the Bible, of the revelation, of how Christians should live his Christian life, and so we definitely have the same problems as in churches outside.
No different.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Paul's warning applies everywhere.
Right.
Yes, it does. It does.
Unfortunately, we want to be the holy Russia land without no mistakes, no problems, but it's not true.
Yeah. It's not so great over here either.
Well, that's always been the case. I mean, one of the interesting things for me is when I start talking with a group that is teaching some heresy or other, and I will ask them, because they usually try to create uniformity and call that unity. We all believe exactly the same thing. There's no deviation, like Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. We teach exactly the same thing in every Kingdom Hall on Sunday. Around the world, you will never hear any deviation at all. And I'll ask them, well, what are you trying to do? And, well, we're trying to get back to the New Testament church. And I have to laugh because I wonder, and sometimes I ask them, have you actually read the New Testament? And they said, well, what do you mean? Well, this pristine faith that you think existed somewhere in the first century, we don't find it anywhere in the pages of Scripture. Most of the New Testament is written to correct false teaching and heresy and bad behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, such a topic like emergent churches also starting to appear in Russia, because
Oh,
We do
really?
have so-called non-denominational churches who wish to believe in kind of general Christian doctrine, not going deeper in any theological questions. They're accepting all kinds of variety of Christian views to Trinity, deity of Christ, and things. And they're saying actually it's not so important to go deep in theological questions. The most important is to feel a real love to Christ, to kind of proclaim his resurrection from the death, and and to live kind of full Christian life. I mean that you are enjoying your relationships with God, and actually the doctrine is doesn't matter, because doctrine usually destroy the unity. The Christian doctrine usually divide Christians to a different denomination, but we are not a denomination. We are kind of a true Christian church as it was from the very beginning, you know, from the times of New Testament. So we also have such churches in Russia.
So did Rob? Wow, what was that? Rob Bell and I'm getting echoing.
It just started.
Just started.
Rob Bell, Brian McLaren. Let's see who else is. There's really kind of a spectrum of. We at one point Mark Driscoll would have been considered part of the emerging church movement, but he was too orthodox, ironically. Since then, he's had issues, other kinds of issues. We have, let's see, Anthony, is it Anthony Jones? I forget.
Yeah, Tony Jones. Tony Jones, yeah.
He's the one that pretty much takes the attitude of, why should we listen to a 2,000-year-old book? Well, the thing about our emerging church, I don't know if it might be the same with yours, is that are you familiar with the American phrase "hip and trendy"? It means very fashionable, very so it's especially among the youth. It is, if you're hip and trendy in the United States, that you definitely have the attention of the youth, those who consider themselves with the in crowd, so to speak. We had a book that came out a few years ago called Hipster Christianity, and it pretty much captured the ethos, at least the cultural ethos of the emerging church movement. So these they tend to be very into the arts. The emerging churches tend to promote a lot of very unusual practices, mystical practices, and so on, that are not exactly mystical in the sense of icons and incense and those kinds of things, but kind of like a do-it-yourself approach to mysticism. So is that the way it's coming, the way it's emerging, the emerging church is emerging in Russia? Is it primarily a youth movement?
Yes, right. Primarily, it is a church consists from youth, and they're based on kind of youth culture, and
yeah.
Actually, I would say it's quite new movement in Russia, and we are mostly capturing such tendencies, not maybe actual names, but tendencies that are happening on the West. We are transferring them in our culture in the term that Christianity should be like a global view to the religion. You know, Christianity is not based on all doctrines, but it's based on special relationships and special feelings that we should have among us and God. And this is kind of a main trend. So I do not remember such churches who are going seriously in art projects or things like this, but they're dealing mostly with youth, you know, this youth culture, like sports, different entertainments, you know, music, kind of good fun and things like this.
Okay. I think, Don, correct me, well, you might have a different perspective on this, but I think over here the emerging church had its heyday from about the early 2000s, maybe 2002, 3, up until about 2009, and then
Yeah, I
it
think that that's true. Yeah.
started to fall apart at that point. I don't think there is a cohesive emerging church anymore in the United States, at least. It's
Well, you have
splintered.
a couple of things. You have in some of the larger churches, they have sort of integrated some of the concepts and ideas
Yeah.
and feelings into what they're doing, and so you'll have really big churches like Willow Creek that can't really come out and say homosexuality is a sin, because what we need to do is to be warming to those that are in that lifestyle, embracing, and it's more important to preach the gospel than to deal with those kinds of issues. And then you have others like Rob Bell, who's basically gone and made alliances with Oprah Winfrey, and so he's gone over to the dark side altogether.
Oh, yeah, it's no accounting for that. The really what it was in the core of it, of emerging church in the United States, was really a revival of 19th century classical liberal theology. Quite a bit of that. I mean, if you lay down a book by Brian McLaren next to the book called The Social Gospel, which occurred at the beginning of the 20th century, or if you took any one of a number of books, they were just really just rehashing things that had been just very destructive in the church 100 years ago, and now it was coming back, and it was grabbing our youth, and that's what made it very frightening from about, like I said, about 2003 or 4 to 2009, and it grabbed a whole bunch of youth and just took them out, and I think for the most part it dumped them. If they didn't stay in what they called an emerging church, they ended up in a liberal denomination, some very liberal denomination somewhere. And they're now, many of them are just gone from evangelicalism. Some of them have come back, but many of them just left. So it was kind of frightening for the parents, especially during that time.
It was, and I think, and this may be true in Russia as well. I don't really know. Part of what was going on was reactionary to what many of the youth saw as a corporatized church that was more interested in kind of nickels and noses without actual relationships. And so they were moving towards something that was almost entirely relational, with very little theological backing, because they wanted to gather around, not have a central teacher, but maybe circle around where they can sort of pool their ignorance together in an empathetic way. Drink coffee and talk about God stuff. It seemed to go that way, but it didn't work well, and it wasn't grounded on anything. So I don't think it had any lasting effect that way.
The beginning of the end, I trace it to, there was the emerging church, and then there was this organization called Emergent,
right,
or the Emergent Church, and they were trying to make a distinction, but really the Emergent organization was the corporate leader of the emerging church, and then they decided, you know what, we're a little bit too hierarchical, we're too white, we're too male, and they completely disbanded their hierarchical structure. They got rid of their leader. They tried to go completely from vertical to horizontal in their structure, and it just collapsed. Nobody was in charge anymore. There was no vision, there was no leadership except what had already been articulated, and it just ended up falling apart. And I don't even know if you go to the Emergent website, I don't even know what you find there anymore.
So in Russia, and maybe Paul, you could comment on some other countries you're working in. I guess what was my question? How are churches dealing with their current circumstance in terms of training and equipping their people to be more able to reach out to their neighbors with the gospel in an informed way? And how do they or do they try to equip them to deal with some of these New Age ideas in the emergent church sort of structure?
This varies greatly by the place you're talking about. So, for example, in Uganda, there is very little of what you would recognize here as having much of a relation to the emergent church as it's just been described. So that's not really a problem. This kind of phenomenon is much more typical in North America, Western Europe, maybe Australia, New Zealand, not so very much in the places that we're serving. Although I will say in Brazil, which has become utterly anarchic in terms of non-Catholic, self-described Christian groups, these kinds of influences and these kinds of experiments have traveled somewhat farther than in the other places where we serve.
To shift gears a little bit, how important is the internet in Russia for, and how widely is it being used for theological training by conservative Bible-believing Christians? Is it becoming a very useful tool? Does the government place excessive restrictions on it, or is there a lot of freedom to access it?
For now, it was a lot of freedom, and the growth of internet users in Russia was very rapidly. And up to this time, it was exponential growth, and especially among those who are connecting through the cell phones, iPads, and things like this. So these kinds of users, we do have exponential growth. Also, we see that people are spending more times watching TV, watching internet, YouTube channels, or watching the news from the internet pages than they are watching TV. So, and in this case, the internet really became a very important for distributing information, especially that the territory of Russia is huge, and if you want to travel to teach somewhere, it's quite difficult to go somewhere.
You have training courses on cults and biblical apologetics on YouTube.
That's right. On YouTube, we do have our educational website developed by our own, and actually we do have 8 different websites for different audience, for different people, for different groups. So we see that internet is very important. People with great interest using this, and we need to use this instrument.
One thing I was very surprised to hear last week. I'm hearing an echo.
That's weird. All right.
Okay. One thing I was very surprised to hear last week was that we had a guest on who was an expert on Mormonism. It was last week, right, Don? I hope so.
Yes, James Walker.
In any case, I was amazed to discover what the internet, what it's accomplishing, almost not unintentionally, really, but unexpectedly. Many Mormons are discovering all kinds of information that they had not been accessible to them, and now it's within a few keystrokes on the web. And they're leaving the Mormon Church. I was not aware of this. Did our guest give us estimates on how many members this has cost them? But it was a significant, and it's an ongoing thing. It was very encouraging to me that it's out there, and so I think it should be encouraging to you guys as well that it's having unexpected benefits in places.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, for example, for Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of people are in conflict, struggling, on the verge of walking away, and praise the Lord that your internet presence is helping people to escape the watchtower and find real faith in Christ.
Right, and people using our websites for proving that Jehovah's Witness organization is false, and using our materials and during the conversation, so it's everything very helpful. We know, and we put a lot of effort into the internet.
Okay.
Excellent.
So we have some links in the, as I said, in the showcase, so they can look at your websites if they can read Russian, or they can go to the main CFAR in English website, and that is if you don't go to look at the showcase, that is thecenters.org, correct, Paul?
Yes, sir.
Thecenters.org, and they can email you, and can they email Pasha through there as well if they have questions?
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Okay. If they wanted, say, Paul, if somebody wanted you to come and speak at their church, you're open to that. Would they just contact you by email and to start
Yeah.
that process?
Yes, by email, by the phone number on the website, we're available.
Okay. Ron, you want to kind of start doing a little bit of a wrap-up on our time together?
Sure. Yeah, we should probably hear from our friends who have some questions for us. Are you tired of hearing about all the difference between the milk of the Word and the meat of the Word? Are you wondering when your church is going to get around to serving the ice cream and cheesecake of the Word? Does your pastor take this whole Bible thing way too seriously? Well, you need to check out the Bible Buffet. It is not your father's worship experience, but it is a very comfortable one. We have it all prepared for you, all laid out. Everything there is gluten-free, trans-fat-free, and truth claim-free. We have an amazing menu filled with all kinds of goodies for you this week. Our regular Sunday specials include Aryan appetizers, Sibelian succotash, Galatian goulash, Gnostic nut salad, and Pelagian pie. The Bible Buffet is a fully accredited ministry of the Church of Smorgasbordianism, the Bible Buffet. So, is that it, Don? Is that?
Yeah, let's do our end credits, and then we can say goodbye.
All right. Well, I want to thank our guests for coming, Paul and Pasha. In the meantime, everybody should know that as I prepare to do this again, I know what I'm doing almost. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage is handled by Armageddon and D. Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau is headed up by Lucy Goosey. Our transgender coverage is handled by Ben Hur. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes from Murky Research. Our legal advisors come from the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. Our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc., which is solely responsible for its content, although you will not be able to prove that in court.
All right, Paul, Pasha, I am so glad you guys were able to be with us tonight, and hopefully others will find it helpful.
До свидания.
Thank you for the invitation.
До свидания. Yes.
Blessings, and